Good morning!
I'm your radio teacher,
I am your science buddy.
and I'll give you an exciting lesson that you'll surely enjoy.
Sci Talks Radio. Education must continue.
Learning is a great avenue.
No one will be left behind.
With new normal comes new learning.
New method, new way of understanding.
Keep on learning.
Keep on achieving,
There's no way of hindering.
enriching one's dream.
This is Sci Talks Radio, your number one source of science education. Conveying a half an hour of quality scientific teaching on air.
This is Sci Talks Radio.
Good day to our beloved grade 9 learners. This is your school on the air. We are pleased to join you in your study through the radio. I am your radio teacher, Ma'am Merlin Paguyo. Please make yourselves comfortable as you participate in our broadcast. Have you taken a meal already? We do hope so, as a sound mind makes a sound body. Keep yourself in tip-top condition so you may focus well on our topic and understand the lesson at hand. Are you ready to learn today? All right! Kindly make your science modules available beside you together with your pen, extra sheet of paper, and your science notebooks. In the previous episode, you have learned how the development of atomic models, like the quantum mechanical model of the atom, led to the description of the behavior of electrons within atoms. In this episode, you will focus on how the different types of compounds like ionic or covalent can be recognized based on their properties such as melting point, hardness, polarity, and electrical and thermal conductivity. So before we proceed, let's have a warm-up activity by answering some questions found in your module under What I Know, pages 2 to 3 of your module. This will assess how deep is your knowledge about our topic today. Are you ready? That's nice! Let us answer the 5 questions. Do this in a 1/4 sheet of paper. Write only the letter of the correct answer for each question. Did you understand? Good! Just a reminder, you must answer the questions honestly. Let's start. Number 1. Which is a property of ionic compound? A. Soft and flexible. B. Crystal lattice structure. C. Liquid or gaseous state at room temperature. D. Does not conduct electricity both in solid and melted form. Number 2. Which is not a property of a covalent compound? A. It has low melting point. B. It exists in a stable crystalline structure. C. It does not exhibit any electrical conductivity. D. It is usually solid at normal temperature and pressure. Item number 3. Which gives the best explanation of why a solid ionic compound does not conduct electricity? A. Ionic compounds do not have ions. B. Solid ionic compounds are not soluble in water. C. Solid ionic compounds have ions which are free to move. D. Solid ionic compounds have ions, but these ions are not free to move. Number 4. Which of the following statements best explains the high solubility of sodium chloride or NaCl in water? A. The ions are free to move. B. There are positive and negative ions present in the substance. C. Sodium chloride break apart into molecules, not an individual atom, when dissolved in water. D. The positive and negative ions are attracted to different regions of the polar water molecules. Number 5. Why do ionic compounds conduct electricity when dissolved in water, but most covalent compounds do not? A. Covalent compounds have lower melting point than ionic compounds. B. Covalent compounds are weakly bonded, while ionic compounds are strongly bonded. C. Covalent compounds do not dissolve in water since they are composed of nonpolar molecules. D. Covalent compounds dissolve into molecules, while ionic compounds dissolve into ions that conduct charge. That's it! Let us see if how many correct answers you will get by checking your papers while I read to you the letter of the correct answers. Shall we start? Now listen carefully because these are the letter of the correct answers. Do not forget to check if your answers are correct. For number 1, the correct answer is letter B. Crystal lattice structure. For number 2, the answer is yes, it's B. It exists in a stable crystalline structure. For the next item, the answer is D. Solid ionic compounds have ions, but these ions are not free to move. How about in number 4? That's right, it's letter D. The positive and negative ions are attracted to different regions of the polar water molecules. And for the last number, the correct answer is D. Covalent compounds dissolve into molecules, while ionic compounds dissolve into ions that conduct charge. Alright, how was it? Did you get a high score? Now kindly count the number of your correct answers, then write it on the upper right part of your paper. Did you get a perfect score? That's good to know. And for those who did not get a perfect score, don't worry, because that is just a warm-up activity. You still have chances to get high scores on your next activities. All you must do is to listen carefully and understand our lesson for today. Moving on to our topic, I would like you to take your module to page 7 under What's New. Getting to know about chemical compounds. Let us see if you can identify the name of elements included in the given compound and determine whether the elements are metal or non-metal. Answer for number 1 item is provided as an example. Write your answer on a separate sheet of paper. Let us start answering.
Mare, narinig mo na ba ang tungkol sa online distance learning ng DepEd? Ano ba ito? Ay oo, Mare! Ang online distance learning ay isang pamamaraan kung saan maihahatid ng mga guro ang kaalaman para sa mga anak natin sa tulong ng teknolohiya gaya ng internet, laptop, computer, at cellphone. Ganun ba, Mare? Oo, Mare. Hindi magkakasama at magkakaharap ang mga estudyante at mga guro. Maaaring matuto ang mga bata sa pamamagitan ng online na pagkatuto. Isang mensahe mula sa kagawaran ng edukasyon at ng himpilang ito.
Alright, time is up. Let us check your answers. For number 2, sugar. The elements involved are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The types of elements are non-metals. Let us have number 3, potassium chloride. The elements involved are potassium, which is a metal, and chlorine, which is a non-metal. Number 4. Yes, you are right. The elements involved are carbon and oxygen, which are both non-metals. How about the last item? You are right again. The elements found in sodium chloride are sodium and chlorine, which are metal and non-metal respectively. Amazing! Now let us see if you can answer the guide questions. Number 1. How do compounds form? Correct! A compound is formed when two or more elements bond. How about question number 2? What does a compound contain? You are right! A compound contains two or more elements. Digging deeper, compounds play a big part in our everyday life. Like for example, you can find compounds present in food, air, cleaning chemicals, and literally in every object that you can see or touch. What are compounds made of? Precisely, they are made up of elements that are chemically bonded by electrostatic forces. Compounds can be classified as ionic or covalent. What is an ionic compound? That's right! An ionic compound is formed when metal or cation transfers its valence electron or electrons to a non-metal or an ion. How about a covalent compound? Correct! It is formed when nonmetals share their valence electrons with another nonmetal. To understand it better, look at the illustration on page 8 of your module. This shows how each element transfer or share their valence electrons to attain stability. Actually, ionic and covalent compounds can be identified and described through their chemical formula and name by observing the types of elements involved in a compound. What is a chemical formula? You are correct! It is a symbolic expression signifying the number of atoms present in a molecular substance. How can we determine the type of atom of a molecular substance? We determine the type of atom by referring to its chemical symbol. How about the number of atoms? You got it right again. It is determined by the subscript attached to the symbol. Moving on with the topic, chemical name shows the name of each element involved in a compound. For example, carbon dioxide. The chemical formula is written as CO2. This means that this is an example of a covalent compound, since the elements involved are non-metals, namely, one carbon atom and two oxygen atoms. Moreover, sodium chloride, which chemical formula is written as NaCl, is an example of an ionic compound, since the elements involved in a compound are sodium or Na, a metal, and chlorine or Cl, a non-metal. To learn more about ionic and covalent compounds, here are its different physical properties that will help you distinguish them. First is its physical state at room temperature. At normal atmospheric pressure and temperature, covalent compounds may exist in solid, liquid, or gas, while ionic compounds exist only as crystalline solids. What must be the reason for this? You are right. In covalent compounds, electrons are shared and no full ionic charges are formed, which makes the molecules in this compound not strongly attracted to another compared to ionic compounds. Thus, covalent molecules move freely and tend to exist as liquid or gas at room temperature, like alcohol, which is widely used as a disinfectant, fuel, and as a main component of alcoholic beverages. The second physical property is its melting point. Ionic compounds generally have higher melting and boiling points, while covalent compounds have lower melting and boiling points. What is the reason to this? That is correct. Ionic compounds have high melting and boiling point because it takes a lot of thermal energy for ions or charged atoms in the crystal to separate them apart from each other. On the other hand, covalent compounds have low melting and boiling point because of the weak force of attraction between molecules. As a result, a small amount of thermal energy can separate them. What are other properties of ionic and covalent compounds? The third property is hardness. Ionic compounds are hard and brittle, while covalent compounds are soft and flexible. What factors affect hardness and brittleness of compounds? Very good, class! It's the crystal lattices. This refers the symmetrical three-dimensional arrangement of atoms inside a crystal. The crystal lattices of ionic compounds are hard and not easily scratched. However, it is brittle, which can lead changes to its shape and size. What about covalent compounds? Precisely! Covalent compounds have molecules that are weakly attracted to each other and are easily displaced. What are other properties of compounds? Yes, the fourth one is polarity. Ionic compounds have high polarity while covalent have low polarity. Polarity in a compound results in the distribution of electrical charge over the atoms joined by a chemical bond. In a chemical bond, polarity arises from the relative electronegativities of the element. What is meant by electronegativity? Outstanding! It refers to the ability of an atom to attract electrons toward itself in a chemical bond. How can we determine the polarity of compounds? Very good! To determine the polarity of compounds, we simply determine the electronegativity difference or En of a compound by subtracting the electronegativity value of the elements involved in a compound. If the difference in En values between the metallic element and non-metallic elements is greater than 1.9, the compound is considered as ionic in character. What about in the case of covalent compounds? Perfectly said, my dear learners! Covalent compound may result in polar or non-polar bond. Polar covalent bond results when the En difference of two non-metallic elements is equal to 0.5 and lower than 1.9. On the other hand, non-polar covalent bond results when the En difference of non-metallic elements is lower than 0.5. Always remember that two identical non-metallic elements or diatomic molecules always produce non-polar covalent bond like nitrogen gas, N2, oxygen gas, O2, and hydrogen gas, H2. Moving on to the fifth property, solubility. Ionic compounds are soluble in water, while covalent compounds tend to be less soluble in water. Why are ionic compounds highly soluble in water? Outstanding! Ionic compounds are highly soluble in water because water molecules, a polar covalent, attract each other of the ions of an ionic compound and pull the ions away from one another. However, ionic compounds are less soluble in solvents that contain a common ion. On the other hand, some covalent compounds are not soluble in water. They do not dissolve well in water. Compounds that have similar properties, particularly polarity, tend to dissolve in each other. This concept is often expressed as like dissolves like. But for substances with unlike polarities like water and oil, where water is polar and oil is nonpolar, these two substances are insoluble with each other. Are you still with me? Great! let us have the sixth property, flammability. Ionic compounds tend to be less flammable than covalent compounds. What is flammability? Yes, it refers to the ability of a chemical substance to burn, causing fire. Combustion happens when substances containing carbon and hydrogen reacted with oxygen gas, and it will form carbon dioxide or CO2 and water H2O. Organic compounds, which are mostly found together in covalent compounds, burn because they contain carbon and hydrogen. As a result, more covalent compounds tend to be more flammable than ionic compounds. Are you familiar with LPG? Very good! Liquefied petroleum gas or LPG is an example of covalent compound that contain flammable mixture of hydrocarbon or hydrogen and carbon gases. It is usually used in cooking equipment, heating appliances, and vehicles. The flammability property of this compound requires all the liquefied petroleum gas or LPG industry participants to observe the minimum safety standards in the transportation and distribution of the petroleum product in cylinders under the mandated order of the Department of Energy or DOE stated in their Department Circular or DC 2014-01-001 or the LPG Industry Rules. Now we are down to the last property, electrical and thermal conductivity. Ionic compounds conduct heat and electricity compared to covalent compounds. What might be the reason to this? Exactly! Ionic compounds are generally considered a good conductor of electricity when dissolved or in aqueous solution. This is because of the presence of mobile ions or solid electrolytes in ionic compound that can transfer electrical charge. Ionic compounds are also considered as good conductor of heat because the ions are all next to each other, making it possible for energy to be transferred efficiently from one place to another. On the other hand, covalent compounds are good insulators of both electricity and heat. This is the reason why that there are no mobile charge particles and electrons are shared by atoms in a covalent bond. Moreover, covalent compounds have molecules that are not as tightly held to each other compared to ions in an ionic compound. As a result to this, heat does not travel well, making heat transfer less efficient. So that's it. To wrap up, how can we identify and describe ionic and covalent compounds? That is right, you can identify and describe ionic and covalent compounds based on their formula and name. Now, what are the physical properties of ionic and covalent compounds? Exactly, physical properties include the following. Number 1, physical state at room temperature. At normal atmospheric pressure and temperature, covalent compounds may exist in solid, liquid, or gas, while ionic compounds exist only as crystalline solids. Number 2 is melting point. Ionic compounds generally have higher melting and boiling points, while covalent compounds have lower melting and boiling points. Number 3 is hardness. Ionic compounds are hard and brittle, while covalent compounds are soft and flexible. Fourth property is polarity. Ionic compounds have high polarity, while covalent compounds have low polarity. Fifth property is solubility. Ionic compounds are usually soluble in water, while covalent compounds tend to be less soluble in water. Sixth property is flammability. Ionic compounds tend to be less flammable than covalent compounds. And the last property, number 7, heat and electrical conductivity. Ionic compounds conduct heat and electricity compared to covalent compounds. To determine how much you've learned today, you are tasked with recognizing the different types of compounds, ionic or covalent, based on their properties such as melting point, hardness, polarity, and electrical and thermal conductivity by supplying the missing word or words to complete the given statement. Kindly bring out your quiz notebook in science and don't forget to write your name, grade level, section, and the date today. Are you ready? Let's begin! For item number 1, chemically bonded compounds can be classified into ionic or blank compound. Number 2, like elements, compounds have blank that allow us to identify them by just observing at a given sample of compound. Number 3, in general, blank compounds exist as solid, liquid, or gas at normal atmospheric pressure and temperature. Number 4, in a compound, polarity results in the distribution of electrical charge over the atoms joined by the bond. Polarity of compounds depend on the blank difference of elements involved. Number 5, compounds that involves metal and non-metal and has an electronegativity difference of greater than blank results in an ionic compound. Number 6, ionic compounds tend to have blank polarity, while covalent compounds have blank polarity. Number 7, blank tend to be hard and brittle, while blank tend to be softer and more flexible. Number 8, blank exist in stable crystalline structure. Therefore, they have higher melting and boiling points compared to blank. Number 9, ionic compounds are usually blank in water, while covalent compounds tend to be blank in water. And for number 10, blank compounds tend to be more flammable than blank compounds.
Mare, narinig mo na ba ang tungkol sa online distance learning ng DepEd? Ano ba ito? Ay oo, Mare! Ang online distance learning ay isang pamamaraan kung saan maihahatid ng mga guro ang kaalaman para sa mga anak natin sa tulong ng teknolohiya gaya ng internet, laptop, computer, at cellphone. Ganun ba, Mare? Oo, Mare! Hindi magkakasama at magkakaharap ang mga estudyante at mga guro. Maaaring matuto ang mga bata sa pamamagitan ng online na pagkatuto. Isang mensahe mula sa kagawaran ng edukasyon at ng himpilang ito.
Well, that concludes your quiz. Let us see if you've got the answers right. Please check your papers honestly. Are you ready? For item number 1, the answer is covalent bond. For number 2, the correct answer is properties. Great job, everyone! Now for item number 3, the correct answer is covalent. For item number 4, the answer is electronegativity. Number 5, the answer is 1.9. We are down to number 6. The correct answers are high and low. Number 7, the correct answers are ionic and covalent. For number 8, the answers are ionic and covalent. For item number 9, the answers are soluble and insoluble. And for the last item, the answers are covalent and ionic. Did you get a perfect score? Congratulations to you, my dear learners! If not, don't worry. I know you can do better. Please do review your module once again in your spare time. We are now done with yet another lesson, and thank you very much for your excellent participation to our broadcast. I am looking forward to our next session. On behalf of the pen behind this script, Ma'am Merlin M. Paguyo, and the SDO Isabela RBI production team, we thank you for listening. Till next time, dear learners, I am your teacher on air, Teacher Merlin. Keep tuning in on this station for another episode of learning. Until next time, God bless everyone. Keep safe, everyone. Have a good day.
Patuloy ang edukasyon para sa ating henerasyon.
Sa daan ng pagkatuto ay walang may iwan.
Kaya halina sa Radyo Eskwela.